Hello, welcome to Forest Focus. The dust is settling on the news that Nottingham Forest have been hit with an FFP charge by the Premier League that may not be resolved until the season has ended. We'll discuss that news and preview the FA Cup replay against Blackpool tomorrow in the company of, first of all, Reds fan Greg Mitchell. Afternoon, Greg, you well?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yourself?
Good, not too bad at all. Second guest today, booked at short notice after a WhatsApp conversation last night, is former Reds midfielder David Prutton. Prutz, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. I just sit here waiting in different. I was going to say waiting in different chat rooms. That sounds even worse. Waiting in different waiting rooms for different podcasts. To go, yeah, I can say something. Yeah, I'm ready to go. So ready and raring to go, mate.
Where are you today? I mean, this is not good for our iTunes listeners, but there's no background stuff.
I know. I'm in the middle of manoeuvring things around. I mean, this one is proper kind of cell block vibes, isn't it? Which is, I mean, given the kind of narrative of what we're going to discuss, it was a depressing background for a depressing conversation. I thought that fit the bill. Whereas I chuck on my guitars up, but Pete's killed me with that. And he's got all the right stuff there. Look at you.
You do have Sent to the Spare Room by the Wife vibes going on today, perhaps with that background.
Hey, welcome to my world.
Third guest there that Prutz mentioned is Reds fan and former colleague of mine and friends, Peter Blackburn. Not quite a debut, Pete. You've been on before, but many years ago. Good to have you back. Are you well?
Yeah, very well, thanks. It's lovely to be back and great to see how well the pod's been going since I was last on.
Yes, thank you. Strength to strength. Obviously, a bit of a challenge on the pitch for Forest at the moment, though, around the FFP news. We spoke about it at length yesterday. Got the take of Fletcher, Lewis and Temps. Get the take of the other lads as well here. And through the weeks, it's such a big topic. Greg, kick us off. What are your thoughts on it? Was it a shock yesterday or did you see it coming in the end?
No, it had been slowly and surely leaked out. We all knew it was coming, didn't we? It's just the cloud, the anxiety of now knowing we've been charged, but not knowing what's going to happen to us. I think that's the stinker of it all. And you can say, oh, it's our own fault. We knew the rules and this is the punishment that we're going to get for it. But just not knowing till up to 5 days after the end of the season, that's not going to be fun at all. And it's certainly going to rejuvenate the clubs below us, isn't it? And give them something more to fight for. So I just wish there was a way that we could find out sooner rather than later what it's going to be.
Afternoon to everyone in the comments. Very much appreciate your company. Was it Jack who was saying time to take the Christmas lights down? They're not Christmas lights, Jack. They're just lights. But yeah, it is time to take the lights down. And thanks to Andy for becoming a member of the channel. Appreciate the support from everyone in that sense. Prutz, lots of love for you in the comments as well today. So they haven't heard you speak much yet, but they're enjoying.
No, and it's the day after Blue Monday, so the only way is up for everybody is. So that's maybe what it is.
True. Pete, what's your take on yesterday's news? How are you feeling about it?
I guess a bit disappointed overall. I think we've had sort of conflated debates in some parts about whether we're talking about the sort of efficacy and quality of these rules or whether we're talking about Forest working within them. I mean, the rules themselves I have a lot of issues with. They seem sort of oddly protectionist in a footballing environment that is so outrageously free market the rest of the time. It seems like a very odd match, to be honest. But aside from that, and I don't think that's necessarily relevant at this point, is Forest knew the system they were working in. These are obviously complicated regulations, but the sort of overall point of them is relatively straightforward. And the club told fans that they were playing within the rules, that they were keeping an eye on the financials, and that they were monitoring FFP and they were going to stay, or profit and loss, I should say, and they're going to stay within the limits. That was a particular claim made by Nick Randall, and they haven't done that. And I think, as Greg said, it was sort of fairly obvious that it was coming because of the briefing, but also because of the business that the club has done over recent years. For me, this is not a recent problem. It's not an issue of the last season. It's a 6-7 year problem. If you look at the transfers the club has made, I don't think we've made less than 14, 15 in a season since 6 years ago, 6-7 years ago. We're averaging 19 odd. Obviously, last season there was 30, and those were extenuating circumstances to some degree. But I'm sure Prutz will know much better than me, but it feels like that's not a great way to be sort of structuring your playing staff, and for managers to be sort of trying to cultivate an environment of sporting excellence. But yeah, so I'm disappointed, to be honest, and I'm hopeful that some lessons might be learned, and we can take the good bits of the recruitment, because there really are some good bits. We've got some great players with real resale value, and just lose some of this quantity, and especially some of the quantity that never even kick a ball for us and cost a lot of money.
Is that a big thing? I mean, I did a video last night, Prut, saying it needs to be a wake-up call around recruitment, and we have to take something from this. We might get away with it this season, but we can't be here again. I mean, what's your take on it in general, and that point Pete made specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we've had it was Lewis McGugan on here, wasn't it, talking about the strength and the power of recruitment, having had first-hand knowledge of it. The more you read into it, and whether you go down the Athletic route of reading their stuff, the Mail, there was a couple of pieces in the Daily Telegraph yesterday as well. That sense of Forest finding themselves in a position which is wholly of their own doing. Now, the debate about what the rules are, or whether the rules fit, and whether they're going to be changed is a little bit moot, because they're there. There was a comment that said as well, I mean, there's no one that comes into the Premier League with their arms twisted behind the back saying, sign this or bugger off. They voluntarily agree, because they use that term stakeholders, don't they? Members of what the Premier League is. And to have that type of scattergun approach that has been just the MO is staggering, even in footballing terms. We know it's kind of populated by people that go bananas when it comes to this situation. And the sheer volume of players, I mean, the numbers are put something like 42 now, which is just, again, staggering, because I don't think Forest have got value for money. I think there'll be an army of agents that have gone, let me get you to Forest, we'll pay you this amount of money, we'll get this deal. I mean, the fact that you've still got, and it's not a stick to beat someone like Harry Arter with, the deal that he's got, which just keeps going and going and going and going upwards and lengthwise. The Chris Wood deal, off the back of coming from Newcastle. There's the like I said, it's been scattergun at best, and now to find themselves in a position where it could, at the most wonderful time on the pitch for the best part of 20-odd years, 25 years, to be in that much mess off it, I think it's not an irony that's lost on any Forest fan, because it potentially will go into the structure, of course, of where they want to put Brennan's money and all that type of stuff. The fact that they made more money selling him later, but by virtue of that could get fined more and get sent down back to the Championship with a points deduction, means that's completely backside about face. And I just think it reflects on who's been running the recruitment department, and if it's the owner's son, again, very, very surprising with that. And it smacks of a football club where a man runs it and is never told no.
I mean, there are, like Prut says, Greg, there's lots of different strands to recruitment with Forest. Miltos Marinakis has been involved. We've had George Sirianos, Steve Cooper, Nuno will have a say now. Clubs work in different ways, but I guess is it more how the money's been spent and where it's been allocated, and obviously the owner's put in huge sums of money to his credit, but do we have to think about how we allocate this money in future so we're not here again in a year's time?
Yeah. I mean, and if we stay up as well, because we just don't know what the points deduction, if there is one's going to be. I think we've obviously got to learn from it. If the same people are allowed to make the same mistakes as what have supposedly been made this time, then it's just going to keep happening and happening, isn't it? I mean, we all knew when we got promoted, and all these other clubs were so delighted we'd got promoted, until we started spending and buying all these players, and it soon changed. So they wanted us to be the whipping boys, and we decided, no, we're not going to be. We need to. So I understood the majority of the signings. It was just now when you go through it with a tooth comb and you say, well, what about him? There's probably 7 or 8 players that have never really contributed, that's going to cost us so much money, which probably took us over the edge. So if we manage to get through this season, which I think we will do, even with the points deduction, I think we've got to, someone said in the comments now, you've got to be 11 points clear at the end of the season, because we still might not know at that point. If that is the case, then a whole new structure has to come in place. Forget about the pride of who's there and, who thinks they can run it. If they can't, someone capable or a team of capable people have to, because it's just going to damage the ownership as much as it is the fans.
The thing that in this must be super galling for Forest fans is, having seen other football clubs, this isn't Da Young at Reading. This is absolutely nowhere near that. This is a man, a very, very, very wealthy man.
and
ambitious, who's decided on Nottingham Forest. And if you're a Forest fan, after what's happened under Fawaz and going back several years, you're kind of going, well, this is brilliant. But the structure doesn't allow that, because the structure is put in place. And this is me not beating the drum for the way that the Premier League set up this. And if it does change, it's part of the evolution of the way that football finance is governed, because it's there to stop Pompey happening, a Premier League team going into administration. That's what it's for. The argument about it favouring the big clubs doesn't really wash, because that's a timing issue. If Forest had been in this position 15 years ago with money coming in, potentially they'd be like Man City. Potentially, like, I know that's a bit of a leap. Potentially they're like a Chelsea. But because the times have changed and football finance governance has changed, the timing of it is possibly going to bite Forest on the backside, because there is a debate, and I don't know whether it'll ever gain any traction at all, that a club that has deep pockets and manages to pull off the miracle of getting into the Premier League should potentially have a little bit of sway to chuck a kitchen sink at it to stay there, shouldn't they? I mean, here's a length of time, here's a spending gap, go for it. If you've got it and you can cover it, go for it. You know what I mean? That then means that you've got teams that can climb into that and go, right, I'm coming for you, we're coming for you. Sheffield United getting in there, not being able to spend any money, selling the best players. It happens across the board. Burnley, the way that they're bankroll. Luton Town. I mean, they're never going to have the turnover that gets anywhere near even the clubs in the middle of the division. When you've got Aston Villa in the top four, needing to sell players before they bring players in. When you've got the richest club on the planet, Newcastle United, that need to sell players to bring players in. That shows you it's not balanced against smaller clubs. It's just the way that these rules have been, and the timing has worked for the likes of Man City and Nottingham and Chelsea in the past. But there absolutely is an argument to do that, to help these clubs jump into the Premier League, have a bit of a wobble and stay there. But that's not the case. And what's happening now, because there is a bit of a vein perhaps on Twitter about bias and conspiracy, etc. It's not. It's poor management coupled with poor timing. If those parameters are suddenly different next season, the ownership has got to be absolutely kicking themselves to think, Christ, why don't we just pull it in here to survive, and then maybe see what's coming in the next few seasons with regards to getting players in and out the door. I think broadly the fans that turn up and have done so in the droves for the best part of what God knows how long, you trust in the people that run football clubs to be able to understand what the small print is. And this small print is writ large. They know exactly what it is. They know what the figures are. They know what the figures are for the Championship. They know what the figures are for the Premier League. And then to get to the point where you're kind of missing it by a fair way, it's not unforgivable. It's just chronic mismanagement, isn't it?
Take a quick word for our sponsors before I bring Pete back in. As ever, sponsored by the Trent Navigation. You can watch the Blackpool game there tomorrow and get some for this. These are jarring switches of gear, aren't they, from FFP to Curry? But yeah, get a curry down the nav and watch the game. I probably should have done this plug later in the video when we were going to talk about Blackpool, but we're here now, so let's roll with it. Yeah, watch the game at the nav tomorrow, and you can get your dinner down there for £8.50. Right. How does it sit with you, Pete, that now we might not know how this is all going to end until 5 days after the season is over if Forest pursue this down every avenue that they have a right to?
Well, I think Greg sort of summed that up already. I mean, not great. It's obviously going to be at the back of the minds of fans at every game, every time we're thinking about the table, the points that are required. Particularly bad for people like Greg who are going home and away as well and spending an awful lot of cash doing it. It's tough. I think ultimately this is probably the time to get the cliche out, and it's just going to have to be siege mentality time, isn't it? I think that's probably a cliche for a good reason, in that it's probably a real thing. Although I'll bow to Prutz on that. So I think it's going to have to be time for us all to be sort of pretty united from this point on. Hope the lessons are learned off the pitch, and just get behind the lads, and Nuno in particular, because ultimately I think they've shown in the 3 league games that there's an awful lot to be positive about on the pitch. It seems like a good trajectory, and I don't doubt that we can stay up with even if we've had 6 points or something similar taken off us. But it's going to loom over us. So we have to manage that now. I think I'm hopeful that within the club there will be good leadership from this point, because we'll need as I understand it, and again, I'll bow to Prutz, but I think my sort of understanding is that players talk about this stuff more now, perhaps than they ever have done. So I guess with rolling news and social media and stuff, they're all going to be pretty aware of what's going on. Some may not care, some may, but I think it will be a talking point from time to time at least. And as such, I think they're going to need the club to support them through it and make it clear what's going on, what the stages of the process are, and where we're gonna get to. But ultimately, so everyone can pull together, because we need points, and we need them pretty sharpish. And there's, every time you look at the Premier League fixture list, it looks tough going, doesn't it? So yeah, that's where I am. I mean, it's a sort of, it is what it is situation, I guess. This is where we are now. And we have to pull together. And I am confident that Nuno and what he's shown is that he can get the best out of players pretty quickly. I mean, you only need to see Morgan Gibbs-White's performances to see what he might be able to achieve here. And as such, especially with those two wins under the belt, I think we can still be safe. I mean, that I don't know what the situation is going to be with a potential points deduction. All the whispers have been something around 6. And if that's the case, I think it's doable, but it's not going to be easy.
I'm going to ask Prutton in a sec about the player's point of view. We don't know what Forest are going to do, but would you shake their hand, Greg, and say 6 points, thank you very much, and think we can, stay up with that penalty and, take your medicine in this sense, because you'll probably survive if you do a good job on the pitch?
I don't think that's an option. I think it's so structured the way it works. I think we can't just say we'll take that rather than what might be coming. I mean, I just wish it was a sooner thing. I think going on what Pete said about everyone having to club together now and, pull in the right direction. I think you've got the trust on one side who need to ask tough questions of the club, and they really need to step up and do that now. Groups like Forza have just got to help get this team and every single individual fan, over the line now, and every home game is going to be absolutely huge. And I was saying about rejuvenating the clubs below us, it might give us that fire that we need to say, well, the whole Premier League's against us. Every single team wants to see us go down because we tried to be successful. So let's really rally together now and just go on some kind of run that can get us out of this. But going back to the original question, I think we'd survive 6 points. I do think we've shown that recently, that we're a much better side than those 3 clubs that are currently at the bottom. But you just never know, do you? Look at Everton. They went on a great run after their 10 points and they've took a dip now. So we've just got to be on a guard, everyone fighting for every single point, and just see what happens. And hopefully we'll find out sooner rather than later, which I don't think will be the case.
So from that player's point of view then, Prutz, there's the Forest players, like Pete says, how are they going to react to it? There's also now, I think, the Luton players, particularly Burnley and Sheffield United as well, they're going to look at this and be encouraged as well. So just speak to us first from a Forest player's point of view. What do you think the chat's going to be in the dressing room today now?
I think the intricacies are there, that there will be a certain element of the unknown, because there is across the board, isn't there? That wait until April is one that's going to be uncomfortable. From a playing perspective, all that they can actually affect, and rather cynically, they can endear themselves into Forest folklore and the fan base by getting on with it, performing, whether they perform for themselves as a collective, whether they perform for the fans. Whatever the motivation is, just to be at their absolute optimum, because that's why they've been brought into the football club. The potential of what comes next only really comes into focus if Forest got a points deduction, which ended up stealing the fate and a return to the Championship, then whoever's got relegation, and this is me talking cynically and brass tacks with regards to footballers, whoever's got a relegation clause will be looking to get away. Whoever's done half decent in the Premier League will be looking to get away. Others that are built slightly differently will stick around. Others will stick around because they've got nowhere else to go. And that's not a reflection on Forest. That's a reflection on a team in the Championship versus a team in the Premier League or in one of Europe's top divisions. And there'll be people that are a little bit more old-fashioned, and possibly it's a bit naive of me to think this, that think, let's stick around and see what happens. The example of Leicester City, seeing the iceberg of this type of situation and kind of accepting to a degree relegation and then doing what they're doing in the Championship, perhaps for them has staved off potential financial doom to a certain degree. They did obviously have to sell their best players, but they kept some very good players as well. Kept a very highly motivated, highly paid squad. You've got to say that. I think that you're looking at a team with a kind of running cost and wage bill up to nearly 200 million quid there. So that's why they're running it. That's why they're smashing the Championship to bits. So there's an element of them being in a position where Forest potentially could be. This is me being kind of a little bit not doom mongering, but worst case scenario. The other side of it is Forest do what they can do. They do as much work between now and April to get themselves away from the bottom three, to be able to think, well, if that is coming, and we've got to put that to the back of our minds, but if that is coming, get your work done early in this next couple of months to make sure that, if it's 6, 8, 10, you're far enough away for it to be not comfortable between now and the end of the season, but just the right side of uncomfortable that you can deal with it and get to the end of the season. So that's and then potentially there was a comment that I'd read on Twitter about how does it affect bringing players in? Well, I presume, does that then make January a write-off when it comes to who they can get through the door? Because from now on, to balance this out, they'll be chasing the backsides, won't they? Because otherwise you get in a position where Everton get done again. So then the Forest get done again if they don't bring things back into check, into balance. Is that the way that works, Matt?
Well, I think they can still bring players in. It's a rolling 3-yearly program, isn't it? So if
you look at the way that they've spent money so far, it needs a fundamental change in approach to how they bring players in, doesn't it? It can't be, as Pete said, give us another 14 in January, unless you get players off the wage bill and sold. You said about saleable assets. I mean, Mangala's possibly one that we're going to talk about in due course. Murillo has come in and done fantastically well. It's a good squad. I don't think it's packed to the rafters with players that you're going to sell for a lot of money. I genuinely, like I said, I've got a lot of respect for what they are as a collective, but to cherry pick one or two here and there to get yourself ahead of profit and sustainability, there's not that many that really jump out and grab you that I can see.
Yeah, and I don't know how we can exploit the loan market massively when we've got players in on loan already. That's a limited avenue. We spent 11 million on Mohamed Deli on deadline day and he hasn't kicked a ball, and you quite fancy having that 11 million now to get someone in. So yeah, I think there is money to spend, but it's not what it was, which comes back to the whole thing I did on the video yesterday, and Temp said it really well, of get the money on the pitch. Don't have it sat in the stands, don't have it training in the bomb squad, or not in the 25-man squad as the case with Steve Cook last season. It comes back to the fundamental kind of reset that I hope this potentially brings in the long term. One more for you, Prutz. This sort of touches on it. One thing I was going to ask Gregor, I'm saying I need to see us beat Brentford before I can be confident about losing the 6 points. If you look at the next 4 games, actually 6 games, I think we've got Arsenal at home, Liverpool at home, Newcastle at home, Bournemouth away, and obviously Brentford away. It's a tough run of games. It feels to me like if we can get through these in pretty good shape, we've got a really good chance. But if we get through this in horrible shape, does morale get really hurt from players? And they think, well, actually, I can get a move somewhere else in the summer, and I'll be all right, even if the club isn't.
Yeah, I mean that's how. To be honest, that a lot of footballers think like that, because you're the only person responsible for your career, and playing for big clubs is wonderful. But big clubs in the wrong division, it's a player looks at the immediacy and who's kind of out there available for them to go and join. It's funny you should say that because of the run of games coming up. But like you said, on the positive, it could be a wonderful run of games. Negatively, it could be a run of games where you seriously are too close for comfort to the bottom 3. And then you've got to take into account potentially the form of those teams in the bottom 3 that may see the finish line of May and start going through the gears and give themselves a fighting chance to get out of it. It becomes very hypothetical because it all relies on what Nuno's got at his disposal and how he sets the team up to be able to manage the pressures on the pitch, come away from the pressures off the pitch. Because like I said, the players can't affect that. They can't affect what investigations are going on, what the Premier League are going to deign to be the right sanctions at all. But they can absolutely motor on on the pitch. I'm not saying this because we're lots of fans are watching and avidly interested, but if they can't feed off what's been thrown at them from the crowd, then they're the wrong players anyway. So their job is very straightforward. Win Premier League football matches. That sounds very straightforward, and it's a lot harder in practice than it is in actual kind of speech. But it's for them to do their end of the bargain. They've been brought here. They've been well remunerated. They've been given a wonderful opportunity to play in the Premier League with a massive football club. That for them is their first port of call. Just perform.
There's a comment from Mark, a question saying it might be a points deduction. It might not be a points deduction. It might be a fine, which is true. But just from listening to Kieran Maguire and a few other people saying Premier League owners, fines don't really hurt them, points do. And the precedent's been set with Everton now. So that feels more doubtful, but we wait and see on that one. Thanks to Paul and Alex for becoming members. Paul said that I love that money on the pitch phrase. Yeah, I do. I use it too much. If people are saying in the comments I love it, then I probably overused it. So I'll have to swerve away from that one. One other thing I wanted to ask Pete and Greg for their take, just from a fan point of view. Like everyone was kind of taking the piss this time last year, saying, you're doing a Fulham, you're going to get relegated, you're going to look like mugs and be, I hate the phrase, the banter club. We obviously stayed up, but now we've got the potential points deduction. Is it a bit galling as a fan to be on the end of this, or do you just have to take it on the chin, Greg?
Yeah, I think we were excited about every signing, weren't we? Like it wasn't like we weren't saying, "Oh, don't sign that, don't sign that." So, but it was just it's the whole "told you so" attitude, like I say, of everyone else around it. So, I do think it's going to help us. I do think we're going to use it to galvanise us. It's going to have to. So, time's going to tell, isn't it? Like Greg says, let's see what happens at Brentford. And I'd love it to galvanise us against them, as you'd know. So that'd be the ideal situation, the ideal start to this new kind of disaster that we've found ourselves in.
What about you, Pete? In the sense that we've played into the narrative, I guess.
I mean, I don't want to devalue the question, but from my perspective, I just honestly couldn't care less what fans of other clubs are saying on Twitter. We've got plenty to be getting on with. I'm really not bothered.
That's fine. That's short.
Got enough of our own fans giving us rubbish on Twitter.
See you next time, lads.
That's the thing.
Good of Peter join us with one appearance.
Yeah. That's the thing that within this and that the like you said, the banter side of what football tribalism is. It generates wonderful atmospheres that you see at the City Ground. It generates wonderful atmospheres around different football grounds, but there is the element as well. I mean, people take great pride and revel in others' misfortune, don't they? There'll be a fair few that are thinking, "Oh Christ, is our house in order?" You know what I mean? With regard, because as you said, from the outside looking in, when you listen to Nick Randall early before this saying about everything being fine, and it goes back to my earlier point about what Forest have done on the pitch in the last couple of seasons, has been an utterly glorious thing to see. But I don't think any of us were really party to what kind of was going on under the surface. And it just goes to show, once again, that the kind of labyrinth way that football clubs are run, that you never really know. I mean, we heard rumours about Steve Cooper's position, about the hiring and firing of recruitment teams, of people that are responsible for bringing a player in that appears to be crap and then turns out to be good so they come back. And then people that don't necessarily have that experience of, not football clubs, but English football clubs, Premier League football clubs, and the way that they are set up and run, with a CV to match of knowing how to bring players in, knowing how to structure a football club. And that great thing of a man that's come in with a lot of money and says, "I want to do wonderful things with Forest." You can't take that away from Marinakis. But the other side of it, of rounding slightly roughshod over the way that the structure is in place, that again, the word mismanagement comes to mind. He's obviously he's a very, very wealthy man, a very successful man in so many different avenues. But the Premier League is structured and very much tied to these stipulations. And if you've got it wrong, then whoever's in charge of getting it wrong, they've held their hands up to a degree. But if you're a bit of a fatalist, it might just be a little too late, unfortunately.
There is one point. I know I'm just putting Greg Orham's comments up. There was something I wanted to address about hindsighting it and being swept along, and I was guilty of it as well. I think we all were. But I think the thing is, for me, as a fan, you put that kind of bond of trust in the club, don't you, to actually stay within the rules, and you kind of think, well, as Pete said, stuff was said, we're taking it seriously, and I'm sure they were, but they've obviously. Well, they've said, I think they've admitted they've gone outside the boundaries, and I'm sure there's mitigation, but they have done it. So that's part of the hindsight thing. You just buy into the club getting it right, and they haven't really, it looks like. So yeah, that was one of the points I was going to address. One last thing for Prutz before we move on to the Blackpool game. We were discussing earlier a bit about players coming in, and I think there is some money to bring players in. So let's assume there is, Prutz. From a potential signings point of view, would this put them off, or is it a case of, as ever in football, if you say you're going to pay them enough money, they'll still come?
Yeah, it's as simple as that. You structure it correctly. Yes, there is the looming threat of potentially being in the Championship, and as Billy very rightly puts on it, if anything that keeps you away from the Championship is me not talking about the football team on a semi-regular basis.
He's not a fan of yours, is he, Billy? No.
Play this in the Forest dressing room. If that's not motivation enough, I don't know what is. I mean, coming away from that sense of getting players in the door, it's been and has been an attractive place to play football. Again, financially, they are now in a different stratosphere, Nottingham Forest, for what they're paying players, aren't they? So you're not earning relative Premier League chicken feed. You're earning, I don't know, 6 figures a week. So that will still attract players. The old school thinking of, well, whether it's a Premier League or not might not come into it if your wages are affected by relegation. If you're earning 100 grand a week in the Championship, then and it's the same wage as the Premier League, and you're not getting that anywhere else, then quite frankly, you'd be idiotic to try and go somewhere else. It's like talking about Alexander Mitrovic. Why does he stay at Fulham when they got dropped into the Championship? Because he was on £125,000 a week, and he wouldn't have got that anywhere else unless he goes to where he's gone, which is Saudi, and he's getting even more than that. But from an attracting players point of view, there will be a cautionary note to be kind of sounded with these signings. But on the flip side, let's look at it positively. You get get key signings that drag you comfortably away from the bottom three. So points deductions don't even come into it. You end up with a team cruising into mid-table, which has got the makeup of a team that can compete in that middle section of the Premier League. Then all of this becomes moot. It becomes a ginormous slap on the wrist and a massive red flag for the way that clubs run from now. But it's about being able to attract that type of player that does see the bigger picture of this all could be a very stormy time, but with very calm waters of the other side of it.
Yeah, good point. Hopefully so. Right, before we go on to the Blackpool game, then 400 plus of you with us, which is great. If you're enjoying this and you haven't already, do us a favour and like and subscribe. I very much appreciate it if you do that. Right, Blackpool. Prutz doesn't know this, but we always do lineups for these games, and Greg hates doing them, so you've got the treat of that shortly.
You're suggesting that I don't listen when I'm not on, Matt? I always listen and I always watch.
Do you listen to I know you listen to some, but you don't listen to the previews as well, do you?
Hey, mate, I've got more time on my hands than you know that I can do with. But
feeding Matt's ego here.
Yeah, Prutz, what do you think of my starting 11? Don't know, mate.
I haven't done one because I knew we'd be talking on for a while, so I haven't done one this game. Right, we'll get into those lineups shortly. Pete, how are you feeling about this game? Terrified about it or pretty confident?
I think neither, to be honest. I'm not desperately concerned. I think if we turn up, then we've got a very good chance. I think the squads are getting a bit thin due to injuries and AFCON and such like, but there's still a good 11 there. Obviously, we'll go on to talk about that in a minute. And if we play anything like we did for the majority of the original game, then we'll be fine. It was obviously an incredibly slow start. I mean, slow is probably a pretty kind way to put it. But you'd hope that, that's sort of taught them a lesson as much as anything, and that, ultimately they won't be quite so flat-footed and quite so passive to start the game this time. And I mean, Blackpool are clearly a decent side. They're very well coached. I mean, Neil Critchley's an excellent coach. I think everyone agrees with that. And they've got good players, they've got goal scorers, and they looked really competitive against us, I thought, for a fair bit of the game. So I mean, ultimately, I'd be a bit worried in terms of I think we have to turn up to win the game. But I think if we do, we will win it. And also, I'm not sure that it feels that the sort of the most pressing sort of item on our list of worries at the moment. So as a result of that, I guess that's why my answer to your question is sort of neither terrified nor desperately confident. I'm sort of already thinking about Brentford as much as anything. So I think we'll get a result. I won't be desperately surprised if we don't, but I think we should have learned enough lessons from the first leg to do so, and hopefully that'll be the case.
First. Speaking of turning up, you're turning up now, Greg, aren't you? Even though you said you weren't going to go.
Yeah, I had no excuse. I was trying my hardest, but I think they need a driver, so I'm going up. Yeah, off we go. It might get snowed off, though. There is that.
Yeah, it might. Actually, it might be frozen off. Pete makes an interesting point there about not the most pressing engagement. Is that sort of a good thing in a way to blow the cobwebs the last few days away and without the pressure of a Premier League environment? Or would you rather the next game was the big Brentford game, ideally?
I'm going to stick with what I said last time and say this could be what Nuno needs to kind of fine-tune his squad now. We've all seen it as a negative, and I believed it as a negative as well, but it just might not be. You know, he might see something in a few players. Someone might score a couple of goals, and it might take us into Brentford and give us that extra few minutes that he needed to see. So if we get the result and we get away with it without any injuries, I think it'll be a good thing leading into the big, massive Brentford game.
So as a player, Prutz, it's going to be a bloody freezing cold night, Wednesday night in Blackpool on the coast. You're a Premier League player. You know they're going to come at you. Really, in a sense, it's the last game you want, isn't it?
Yeah, to be brutally honest, there would be some people going, Christ almighty, is that what we're doing? But I have faith in the fact that the professional side of being a footballer comes into fore in a game such as this. I heard Neil Critchley on the radio this morning. It's a game that they're very much looking forward to. Good, really good coach, Neil. Knew that he'd let a pretty good situation slip, of course, in the first leg, first game, being in the position that they were in. They've got that old adage about being a free hit is absolutely right. There's no real pressure on them. Their pressure is coming inwardly for what they want from this season. Neil knows how to get that club out of that particular division. He'll still have aspirations to do that, even though there's some very big hitters at the top end of that league. And a game such as a Forest game at home could be a win that catapults them between now and the end of the season. So, yeah, it'll be one of those where you've got to really trust and rely on key members of the squad being able to galvanise everybody to make sure that you've got to turn up, you've got to get the result, you've got to pay respect to the fans that will travel, bitterly cold night, all of these things that are fundamentals to being a footballer, coming away from the nice, glorious, pleasurable experience that the Premier League can be. They still need to go and perform on nights such as this. And I think from a mentality and an emotion point of view, it can do Forest the world of good. You know what I mean? It's not the most ideal game. The trepidation that comes from what the Brentford game is. And again, I mean, the irony of that, when you look at where Forest and Brentford are in the division and Forest being kicked down the curb with regards to how the club is run and Brentford being glorified for how the club is run, yet you're still looking at them in relatively similar positions. And I'm sure that's not lost on Forest fans at all. But get a game like this boxed off, do that professional job and come away and get yourselves in the hat for the next round. But as Pete says, I love the FA Cup. I love everything that it stands for and has stood for as a younger man watching football and being involved in it. But absolutely no doubt that Forest's first focus is on Premier League survival. That has got to be paramount.
Yeah, and the Brentford game is massive. We'll talk about that more Thursday and Friday, but focusing on Blackpool for now, let's look at these lineups then. We'll give Pete the honour as the relatively new person around here. I'll read it out as normal for listeners, not viewers. Changing goal, Turner in goal, Williams, Worrell, Omobamidele. I put Omobamidele in, that's not right, is it? I've already messed up on Pete's first run around.
It'd be amazing if he plays.
And Williams wasn't in there either.
No.
He always does this, Pete. He always. This is how mine always looks so bad.
Let's rewind and pretend that didn't happen. I can't edit this. Turner in goal, Montiel right back, Worrell, who was the left centre back in last game? Murillo, Toffolo, Yates, Danilo, Gibbs White in behind Wood with Hudson, Odoi, and Dominguez as the sort of de facto wingers. Pete, I've really messed that up. I'm very sorry. Talk us through your team and any obvious corrections there.
I'll try not to look at this line up while I do it. My initial considerations, I guess, were whether there was a thought for sort of balancing tiredness and the need for rest with trying to gel the team, given we've got such a big run of games coming up and this is a really new back four or back five. But ultimately, I think I fell on the latter of those two things. And I'd be interested to hear Prut's views on this, but we've obviously got a defence and a goalkeeping situation that's a little bit of a mess at the moment because there's new players coming into it. There's a bit of a crisis potentially in the goalkeeping position. That back five that I've picked, they won't have played much football together, if at all. Someone might know the answer to that. So my feeling was that it would probably be a good idea to get the back five that you're going to stick with for this next run of games. I think it's quite a balanced back five, and give them some time, I guess, to gel, find some of those sort of instinctive relationships that they're going to need, and hopefully that sets us in a better position for the run of games. So, I mean, I guess the biggest call that I've made probably, well, maybe two. I have stuck with the fullbacks. I'm a bit unconvinced by Tavares, even though he's obviously got attacking instincts, and I think Williams is great, but Montiel's been doing a good job in there and has set up a couple of goals nicely and looks pretty competent as a defender. So I think sticking with the fullbacks, Toffolo and Montiel, is probably the right way to go for the sort of run of the games. And obviously Worrell's going to have to play because we've got pretty limited options, and Omobamidele doesn't appear to be a real thing. I don't know if he actually exists or what. And then on the keepers, it's a big shout, and I've sort of stuck my neck out here. But you're picking between two really not ideal options right now. But I just love that phrase that Mark has where he describes people not being a factor. And it really sticks with me around Blackadamos. I honestly, I'm not really sure if he's actually in that goal sometimes. It's incredible. And I forget which goal it was against Blackpool, first or second. But he just was sort of standing next to his near post as the rest of the play happened around him and across the goal. And he was nowhere to be seen. And to me, that's more concerning than what I've seen from Turner, which, I mean, this is a lesser of two evils situation, I think, to be fair. But I think if Turner's given a slightly easier job, i.e. not asked to do so much with his feet, which is clearly something he struggles with, and perhaps just get the ball up the pitch. It's not really a sort of a philosophy I'm generally sticking to in football, but, you know, ultimately it'd be probably more ideal for it to be away from imminent danger rather than meandering around the box where he's under so much pressure and he just doesn't look like he can do that. But he has made saves. I mean, it's sort of amazing to be saying that as like a positive for a goalkeeper, but he has made saves.
He can catch, which is a good thing.
He can do that. Sometimes he can parry. All useful skills. I haven't seen Blackadamos do anything. Turner actually has made some good saves. To sort of, you know, joking aside, he has made some good saves. Sometimes I think he's quite proactive. He does look a little bit meek, and clearly there's a problem with his feet. But I think those things are sort of manageable if the defenders know the situation, i.e., it's going to be on them to get rid of the ball, to win the ball in the air, and that he has to give the ball to Murillo or just get it up the pitch. I think that's manageable. For when it comes to Blackadamos, I just don't understand how he can be in the team because he's just not a factor, as Mark would say. So I'm going to stick with it and tell Turner that he's the man until something changes in that department, if it does this window.
I'm glad people in the comments notice that, you know, the horrible lack of professionalism is part of the charm of this podcast. So I've stuck to my reputation there with the lineup, certainly. Yeah, it's interesting.
Matt, Omobamidele, right? We've discussed him before. I've seen him play both for his country and at club level. What was the latest that we got to with regards to his position as a starting player?
Well, he came in. This is what I was told.
Is he fit?
Yeah. Him and Murillo came in at the same time, and Murillo absolutely smashed it. And, you know, said, "You've got to pick me." And Omobamidele did fine, but he hasn't done enough to get ahead of the others ahead of him. And let me ask you a question about him then, because I hadn't seen much of him. You've seen him in playing for Norwich. I don't think there was a massive clamour to get him. I'm not even sure he was in the Norwich team regularly. So why are we going out and spending 11 million quid on him from your point of view, Prutz? Would you have said this is the next player from the Championship to sign?
Well, no, because like you're saying, that sense of what was being delivered, he wasn't. He was a very competent player. Whether you look at a player such as that and buy him with that potential of what he could be, first and foremost for Forest, and then secondly, what you may sell him on for further down the line, I don't know. He was a player that came into the Norwich side and was fine. I mean, it didn't you know what I mean? Didn't come in straight away and look like Bobby Moore, but didn't come in either and look like he didn't know his backside from his elbow. So very competent, and again with the national side of the international football side of it as well. The big ticks in right boxes is an athletic looking player. The age that you're looking at, as I said, the potential to see what he could get developed into, what he could kind of move forward into. And if you're looking at a manager in the mold of Steve Cooper that has proven to be good with developing players, then you can see in there why a player might go, do you know what, I want to go and sign that. Again, maybe Forest gave him a bundle more wages. You've got to look at that. The opportunity to play in the Premier League, but that hasn't manifested itself. So then you look into it from the player's point of view. Has he done enough? Obviously not to be deemed to be worth to be part of that starting 11. But also Forest collectively, given where they have been in the Premier League and the debate around Steve's position and the change in manager, reflects a group of players that haven't been set in the divisional light. So you are kind of looking at it, scratching your head to think, well, how many permutations do they have to go through before you play a player such as that? And then if you're going off what this next game means in a Blackpool sense, that it would be the ideal game to put him in. Absolutely. Maybe a bit of pressure giving you the Premier League side against the League One side, but it'd be ideal to come in and do the fundamentals. You know what I mean? Work with a Worrell and say, this might not look pretty, guys, but we're going to get through it. We're going to win. And then you never know, going off Pete's point, where that togetherness takes you. I think it's a good idea to put a group of players together that to kind of say, work each other out, get in a bit of a rhythm and get us solid enough to go to a team but to play against Brentford, get something from that, move on to the next game and look positively into those. But it's just a very curious case. But then given what we've spoken about, 42 players coming in, some that have never got anywhere near the team, some that have come in and gone straight out again, some that have kind of whistle stopped all through Nottingham and out the other side. He might have landed at a football club that looks wonderful on the pitch for the last couple of seasons, but off it has been very confusing to a young player such as that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, people in the comments are rightly saying if he plays for us, he can't go out on loan because he's played for Norwich at the start of the season. So if we play him, we've got to stick with him for the rest of this season or we loan him out. So yeah, fair enough. But it never struck me like, obviously we had Michael Dawson on here last week. Thanks for setting that up for us. There wasn't that clamour I felt to get him into the Premier League like there was with Dawes as a young kid coming through. And then when we have signed him, and this comes back again to the same point about stockpiling players, there's not really an obvious pathway for him to get into the team unless he's taking the place of another established player who's on decent money, like a Worrell, a McKenna, a Felipe or someone. You don't need to have 8 centre-halves necessarily or 9 centre-halves and have Steve Cook out the 25. It's just about having a pathway to the team, I think, was my issue around it. I'm not basing our whole recruitment strategy around Omobama Deli being a dud because he might come good, but I think it was just kind of.
But it's hard to make it. But I mean, like, I bow to Greg's take on this. Of you'd like to, as a balanced fan, and I know that sometimes that isn't always the case, that you just like to see somebody to then give an opinion on, wouldn't you, Greg? Instead of kind of conjecture and debate, because we're talking, like I said, I'm telling you that there's a player in there that I think is decent, good defender. Like you say, like I said, the athletic ability and potential to be a very serviceable centre half. I don't know whether that's a top end championship club, whether it's a team that's fighting for its life in the Premier League, whether it's mid table or top 6. I honestly don't know. But having seen enough of him to think that there is potential there, I can kind of make a bit of a pitch for it. But if you're a Forest fan, Greg, and you're looking at it going, well, yeah, he played for Norwich, but I don't watch Norwich every week. I watch Nottingham Forest every week. So what is he? I'd like to think that you need time to kind of then make your mind up, because it's too easy to make a knee-jerk reaction, isn't it? Oh, he's never played, therefore he's this. You want that proof of your own pudding to go, well, no, I don't like him, or yeah, I do quite fancy him, don't you?
Yeah, and that's why you need, I mean, playing in the 23s isn't going to get you that opinion, is it? You need a cup run, you needed a League Cup run, or you needed an FA Cup game against the likes of Blackpool. But if the sticking point is the fact that we're about to loan him out and that gets stopped if he plays, then obviously he doesn't play. So he's probably going to be one of these players that we just never see play for us, which is a massive shame. But when you've got 42 signings one season and another 20 odd the next, then it's going to happen, isn't it? And you know, it might come back to bite us, but it would have been nice to, you know, get through Blackpool and had another game where it's winnable with players that haven't really had much game time. And that's the beauty of the Cup for the bigger teams, for the Premier League teams, being able to show off what's to come. And we've not had that chance this season.
I mean, he might well come good. It might be this time next year. It might be him and Murillo are our first choice pairing. It's just like, what is the timing of it, I guess. Right, we're going to move on to Greg's lineup. After my disgraceful F, I'm not even going to.
Is this going to be correct? Let's.
Well,
I mean, is this now going to be Pete's lineup?
It's going to be correct if I can read Greg's WhatsApp, because I'm not even going to put the graphic up. So apologies there for that.
So it wasn't
Here's
correct.
Greg's lineup.
Shambles.
No, here we go. Vlachodimos in goal. Montiel, Worrell, Murillo, Tavares across the back four. Mangala, interestingly, and Danilo sitting in front of them, and then Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White, and Dominguez in behind Chris Wood. I'll ask you about a couple of names there, then, Greg. I mean, Vlachodimos, you'd stick with him, and you'd want to see Mangala play, even though we think he might be going.
Yeah, I think Vlad plays because he plays against Brentford. I think Turner's mistakes were that critical. I think it's almost like when a darts player gets, what do they call it, dartitis? You worry if he's going to recover from it. Where Vlad he's not had too many pretty games, but we know that he's a good quality keeper. So I think whoever starts this game starts against Brentford, and I think it will be Vlad. The Mangala thing for me is more wanting him to play, to show that actually he is going to feature and he's not going anywhere. Almost a message from the boss to say we're not selling him. But yeah, they're the only two really that I thought you'd want to speak about, because I ain't got the graphic. I keep having to remember who I've got. But yeah, and the others really choose themselves, don't they? Because we are a little bit thin now, aren't we? We haven't got that many options as we are at the minute with AFCON and everything else and the injuries. It was good to read. I don't know whether you watched Nuno's pre-game interview today, but he mentioned how Taiwo's on grass again and he's a couple of weeks away from training with the full squad. So, you know, fingers crossed, that'd be the absolute lift we all need, better than any other signing if we get him on the pitch again soon.
Gosh, we've done 52 minutes already. Just one more topic to cover then briefly was Mangala. I've asked Lewis's take as a midfielder. I'm a big fan of his. Prutz as a midfielder. Are you surprised that...
I think you're a big fan of Lewis.
Was Lewis a big fan of yours?
And you as a midfielder and not a big fan.
I'll ask Lewis after this what he thinks of you, don't worry. What's your take on this Mangala stuff? I mean, I definitely think it's a case of no smoke, no fire. There's obviously something there with Juventus and Napoli in particular interested.
Big teams, aren't they?
Weirdly on loan. Yeah. I mean, what do you think about it? You can't turn those clubs down personally as a player if they come calling, can you?
Well, I mean, Napoli's a slightly different incarnation to what it was last season. Obviously, the best team in Italy is now trailing quite substantially to the top spot. So there is a bit of a difference with the manager moving on to the national side. But I mean, you are talking about two huge European football clubs, which would be hard to turn down. I mean, I still think, without any bias, I mean, the Premier League is still the best place to play football, definitely in at least Europe, if not world football. So that would be an intriguing one for what Mangala wants to do. Again, the games that I've seen and worked on, I absolutely defer to you chaps that have been there on a very, very regular basis. And maybe it's because I'm looking at where Forest are in the league and some of the results and the performances that I've seen. When you hear that link, is it one where you can kind of go, yeah, I can see it? Or do you think, wow, that's come out of left field because of what you've seen with your own eyes on a weekly basis?
I can see it. I think he's good enough. This season, I'm not going to be revisionist because last season I didn't really see it and kept asking what he did. But this season I've seen it. What about you, Pete?
I'm not desperately surprised. I think he's a good player, and there's lots to like about his game. And some of the things that hold him back potentially hold him back a little bit in England might be things that don't so much in Italy. I guess the reason why he's not in the team might be that the other midfielders that are being picked are a lot more sort of direct, get the ball quickly, a lot more so, and a bit more physical as well. He likes to hang on to the ball. He sort of shimmies through challenges and carries it. But he does that well. And I mean, I don't think it's an overestimation to say he's probably been our best centre mid this year. But it looks like we're not wanting to sort of build a team with him at the heart of it now. I think he's good enough to play for those teams. I don't think it's desperately surprising, but I'm not convinced that he's going to sort of go and be the fulcrum that they build around necessarily. But as a sort of good squad player, I don't see any reason why not. I do think he's a good player.
I suppose, I mean, Greg, on the comments, not our lovely Greg. I mean, I'm sure they're both lovely Gregs, but the Champions League shout is a very good one as well, I presume. You know what I mean? If that's in a player's thinking at that particular age, he's already shown that he's not afraid to move from country to get game time and test himself. There's a lot of respect that you can pay to a young footballer that's prepared to go and do that type of thing. So, yeah, maybe I'd be slightly blinkered there because obviously English football is the place to be, but that sense of pitching yourself in the Champions League, which can be life-changing, career-changing. You know what I mean? You have a good few games in that. Moving forward, you never know, really, do you?
Yeah. Well, Sangare went the other way, didn't he? He turned down the Champions League to come to England. I guess it's, down to circumstance. Maybe he's had a taste of the Premier League and fancies something else. Right. I'm not going to ask Greg about it because as Prutz is a regular viewer, he'll know that Greg and Emily discussed this for about 40 minutes before we went off the rails on Friday. So we'll move on, and we've done it almost an hour already. Where should we go? Greg, any other business before we depart?
There's over 2,100 tickets sold for tomorrow night, by the way, which is pretty ridiculous to say. It's the middle of January, everyone's skint this time of year, so fair play for that. No, not really. Oh, I did an interview with a girl from New York in the week who's a massive Forest fan, Ruby Naylor. She's come over for a month, I think, to do a thesis on the uniqueness of Nottingham Forest, and it was fascinating to speak to her. Her dad's born and bred in Nottingham, I think, and she's grown up in New York, but had Forest in her blood. So I think she's at the Blackpool game tomorrow as well. So I hope we put in a performance for her, because talk about a lovely place to visit from New York. Shock to the system.
With the Big Apple to Blackpool. It's just the same.
Good stuff. Pete, anything else from you before we depart?
Just one little quick thing, and excuse me for being a bit soppy, but just to build on what I said at the very start, watching from the outside, it's been a genuine pleasure to see how this has all gone for you and the way that the pod's going from strength to strength. I think the successes like this are sort of built on good people, and I guess that's very much the case when it comes to you. So it's been a pleasure as a sort of former colleague and such like to see it all working out well. And if anyone watching has got a little bit of cash and can spare it, then join, become a member, and hopefully it goes from strength to strength. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. That's how you get an invitation back, Prutz.
I had to make up for my slightly abrupt comment earlier.
Just making amends. No, I appreciate that. Prutz, anything from you?
No, I mean, I echo what Pete said there. That was a lovely thing to say. It was way better than what you said before you started recording to me and Greg, which you won't go into, because that'll be the instant way of stopping this type of thing going on. I mean, I understand that without sounding too twee or kind of apologetic, they are troubling times, and because an owner's been wonderful in one respect, it doesn't mean to say that you can't question what's gone on. It's fundamentally, yes, there's a man there that's put so much money in, it's mind-blowing, but Forest will exist in decades, years, centuries to come because of the people that watch stuff like this and turn up at the game, and that's it'll be on a shorter list of people that have owned this football club, but the list of people that have followed it will stretch into the millions towards eternity. So you can be, in both senses, be very grateful, but want to ask questions and look for accountability and reasoning and kind of information about it. So never be scared or kind of cowed into not asking questions about the thing that you love, because that's what generates debate and that's what helps to make, hopefully, situations, once Forest have managed it, once it's been got through, and they will get through it, the entity that is Nottingham Forest will always get through stuff like this, for good or for bad, and pick itself up. Once you get through that, hopefully it makes the football club a fundamentally better place.
Well said. Well said. Right, 2 quick ones from me. Well done to Forest women. 6-1 win over Plymouth at the weekend. Took them into the FA Cup 5th round for the first time since 2013. So they're one of only 2 non-WSL teams left in the competition. The other being Wolves. And they have drawn Everton at home in the 5th round to be played the weekend of the 10th or 11th of February. So I don't know if that'll be at the City Ground, but I hope it is. And hopefully people can go down. I went to the Man City game. They played against them in the FA Cup a couple of years ago or last year. I don't know. And that was good. So, yeah. Support that game if you can. And then one for a listener called Jay Hallam. Can you do a shout out in AOB for my under-15 school team, Ashfield School? We face Des Little's Thomas Telford next Tuesday for a place in the quarterfinals of the Elite National Cup. So good luck to Ashfield under-15s. Hope you win against Thomas Telford, which is from my neck of the woods growing up. Right, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks to everyone who's watched along. Good of you to join us for another hour after yesterday's epic one. So appreciate that. Pete, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Good to have you, even though you cut that one question short, but you did redeem yourself with some glowing words, so that was all good. Greg, thank you very much.
Cheers, Matt. Enjoyed it. Good to speak to you, Pete and Prutz, obviously.
Are you back on Thursday, Greg? I think you are, aren't you?
I can't remember. I have got a job, by the way. I do read some of the comments. And it was me who was the wicket keeper. I saw that one as well. I never got to address that. Somebody said they used to play cricket with me.
You were the wicket keeper?
Yeah. He said, did I used to play cricket? It was the last show, right at the end. Did Greg used to play cricket? Was he a wicket keeper? Yeah, I was. Anyway.
Wicket keeper batsman, Greg, were you? Or just
I was
solely the wicket keeper?
I was all-round rubbish. Yeah, they chucked me in the wicket keeper because I was no good anyway.
You can't be rubbish if you're the wicket keeper.
Play for Honour second team. That's as high as I ever got.
Anyway, there we go. Prutz, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Just starting to snow here, chaps, so it's possibly making its way down to you. So get yourself nestled in.
Yeah. I've got to go do the food shopping then because we've got nothing in. And my wife will be absolutely raging if we've got no food and we get snowed in. So I must go and do that. Right, we're back tomorrow post-match after the Blackpool game with someone. You can tell I'm so organised this week. I don't actually know who's doing it, but someone will join me. I know, Prutz, I'm sorry. And then on Thursday, I think it's Greg and Emily. And my headphones fall now. And then
oh my God!
Back on Friday, the Brentford preview, and then the Brentford post-match.
Yeah, Joe working at Forest at this stage. We're flying.
Do the books, yeah. Right.
He needs to rush off.
Good note to end on. I might get in trouble for that. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day, and we shall see you tomorrow evening.